Oh, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I do, I am an engineer. So I work with architects and urban planners to develop cities and all the components of cities, including the buildings, the infrastructure components like bridges, so this is let's say a small selection of some of the projects that we are doing in my company, and the diversity of the projects is huge. As you can see, we are both doing offshore wind turbines, within tunnels, rail projects, airports, apparatuses, solar energy projects, and so on. We work in quite a lot of places on Earth. The company was founded almost 70 years ago by two professors from the Technical University of Denmark. And, these are the two guys a little bit later in their career. They were not only engineers, they were also very concerned about the society as a whole. They were almost like philosophers, and this was right after the Second World War, so they had a lot of strong opinions about how the world should develop in a different direction than what they saw at that time. One of these guys were naturally at that time pacifist, so he refused to work for any military purposes. And so that was one of the basic principles of the company, and that is still the case. The other one was a vegetarian, so they also refused to work for slaughterhouses or any institution that would do harm to animals. So they built the company, they developed it, and still today, these basic principles are very strong in the way we work. We are today 11,000 people working across the world. Not so much yet in the US, I must say, but many other places. The markets that we work in is all the buildings, transport, environment, oil and gas, and management consulting. And the strength that we have is that we have so many different skills, and we can combine those skills, and this is really necessary to achieve the more holistic solutions rather than working in silos. We really try to bring people together and to think through all aspects, to see a problem from all aspects, and then find the best possible solution. So these are the part of the world that we are coming from. I think a lot of you know that Denmark is the capital of Sweden, so that's here. And Copenhagen, no, that's not right. Denmark is not the capital of Sweden. That's a typical American misunderstanding. Denmark is actually a country, and it's next to Sweden, and it's next to Norway. And so Denmark, Sweden, and Finland combined with the Nordic countries, sometimes we include Iceland also. Norway has a capital called Oslo, which is here. Sweden has a capital called Stockholm here. Finland has Helsinki, and Denmark has Copenhagen. And I'm based in Copenhagen, but I work in all these cities on different projects. I think most people will know Denmark for our heavy tax burden. So these are the OECD countries ranked for the income tax. And Denmark, as you can see, is really leading in, we almost pay $4 for every $10 we make. A lot more than many other countries. So how does that influence the way we think and the way we live? I'll come back to that in a minute. Surprisingly, Denmark Christmas Eve, when you give a present to someone, it makes you feel happy, right? So we pay the tax and we're happy about it. So it's not something we try to avoid. We happily pay our taxes. Also, the 4 Nordic capitals have a very high ranking on the Green City Index, which is an index developed by the Economist Intelligence Unit that ranks cities on 30 parameters in terms of how sustainable they are. And so there is something that we are doing right. Let me just come back to this because it is a bit skewed. You don't have all the information when you just look at this. First of all, if you look at the entire tax burden of a country, that also includes what the employer pays for every employee he employs. It's a different picture. So Denmark is actually just the average, and countries like Germany, Belgium, and Austria, they are much higher in terms of tax. Even the US, of course, is a bit lower than Denmark, but the US also doesn't include the, let's say, the healthcare system and the education system. So we have in Denmark, as part of the tax we pay, we have free education, free health system, and a lot of things that we just get for free, including child care and such things. So that's, I guess, one of the reasons that we're so happy. We get a lot of things for free and we haven't paid our taxes. Anyway, let's come back to the cities. So, what are cities for? This is one way of explaining that cities are where people live, work, interact, they trade, they produce stuff, but that's changing over time. So the necessary activities have been decreasing, and the passive or recreational activities have been increasing lately. And what do we mean then when we talk about livable cities? Well, it's I think it's a rather new thing to call, or to try to create livable cities. We talked about sustainable cities for the last decade, but sustainability is in the minds of most people connected to environmentally sustainable cities. It's like carbon neutral cities or clean cities, and not so much the social and economic part of sustainability. When we talk about livable cities, it's more the well-being, the standard of living of people, the quality of life of people, not so much the standard of living, but the quality of life, which is about the good life, how happy are people. Because who wants to be living in a sustainable city if it is not a pleasant place to live, if it is not the good life? Nobody wants to live in a city, although it is carbon neutral and it doesn't impact the environment, but if you're not happy there, if it's not designed and it doesn't work in the right way. So today we'll talk about more the livable city as a concept, and in our company we have set up a livable city lab that does research in livability. What is it that makes a city livable, and how can we influence that? So we have our own definition that a livable city is a city that provides good quality of life for all, and it's both the physical and mental well-being, and also that we are sensitive about nature and the protection of its resources, and so on and so forth. So of course that's also sustainable. A livable city is also sustainable. And what is it that we do in the Nordic countries that makes our cities so green and livable, and all these nice rankings, also happy rankings? Well, I think if there's one thing we've learned from the Americans, it is to look at the free market, the market mechanisms. So a lot of people we don't think that way. We think actually that the way we organized our countries, it's much more, well, it is clearly capitalist countries, but it's also that we look socio-economically at the society. We look at a city as almost a company. So there is there's income and there is expenses. We need to make a profit, and the money we invest has to maximize the benefits that we get. So with the income of a city, it's like the tax income, for example. We want to invest that back, use the money as to get the most benefits out of it, to get the best performance. And how do you do that? Well, you do it in the same way as you do it in a company. You look at the market, you look at your customers, you look at what are you there for. You plan your activities. You have strategy, of course, and so on. So these are the things that we're doing. And so in terms of sustainability, we look at, from the city perspective, we look at every initiative we do, every investment we do. We look at it on all the parameters of let's say, the sustainable idea. We look at how does it benefit waste, how does it benefit water, energy, transportation, but also health, education, safety, growth, and so on. So unless an investment, a new project in the city contributes to all of these items as much as possible, it won't be done. So it's a feasibility study for every investment, for every expense you make. And so when you do a project, of course, you have a strategy. First of all, you develop a strategy to begin with, the vision for the city. What kind of city is it that you want to develop? What is that characterizes the city? What's the identity and so on? So you develop that strategy. You set yourself some goals. What is that I want to do in 2025 and so on. In the case of Copenhagen, for example, we have a goal that in 2025 we want to be completely carbon neutral. So that's a goal that we've set, and we have developed strategies and initiatives to reach that target. That's where you plan things. You start with do detailed planning, and then at the end, of course, do some design in terms of buildings, infrastructure, energy systems, and so on. And that's where we work, architects and engineers. That's where most of our work is done. So you can almost see a city like a tree. Sorry. So you can see a city like a tree where you have to find the roots, and then you have to develop how the tree grows and blossoms. And there are so many topics, I would say, that you need to look into, like water, mobility, energy, waste, education, growth, and so on. And if you can combine those, you get much better performance. So we look at what we need, first of all. Of course, what you need it's necessary for you to invest in and pay for. But there are also wishes, what is nice to have that maybe you cannot afford. But how can you still get it if you combine it with some of the investments you do in terms of your needs? And if you can do that, then you get much more value out of the investments, and you get livable cities. So what I would like to do is I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into some of these issues. I can talk for days if I have the time about everything here, but I would like to take a little more to some of your attention. A lot of the social stuff, the softer things are outside the scope of what you and I do. So I will leave that to others to talk about. But before I start, I would like to just talk a little bit about what has been happening in the last 50, 60, 70 years, both in the US and also in Europe. Well, I think after the Second World War, it's clear that the cities were in a way crowded, too crowded in the beginning, and they were noisy. We got the car invasion, so they were also polluted by exhaust gases. They were smelly, and there were poor quality of housing. So what happened was that we developed the concept of a suburb. This is really nice neighborhood from the 1960s. So you can easily see, how that I don't know. I couldn't see myself living there. But anyway, it was a dream. At that point, it was the dream of a lot of families to move away from the city and to move, where there were more space, more green grass, and so on. And today, of course, we don't really see it the same way. Also in the US, we, as in Europe, we developed these, single-family houses and roads, and so you really need the car to live like this. And so we developed also infrastructure like this, and it was a new age. It was possible to do that, and I'm not going to talk bad about it. I think this was great at that point in time. It was the right thing to do, but today we probably have a different view because we think that a lot of what we did after the Second World War has ruined our cities, and we don't really see the attractiveness of many of these things. And funny enough, this woman, Jacobs, was one of the first ones to shout about, to react to this development. And so in Europe, we've learned a lot about Jane Jacobs. This was 50 years ago that she wrote the book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. And we actually listened to that. Of course, it took many years to completely reject the ideas of modernism. So it was not until, let's say, the 80s that we actually started thinking of doing things differently. So let's talk a little bit about mobility. This is the car development of how much we drive. And as we see, before the Second World War, there was hardly any cars. In Copenhagen at that time, we were cycling a lot, and the car then was introduced, and everybody could afford it. It invaded our cities, and we, over time, we completely forgot about bicycling. But then, at some point, it still, seemed to be the wrong thing to do. And what is the problem? Well, the problem is if you disregard the noise and the pollution from cars, because that actually can be dealt with, I think, in the future. But what is the problem is that they take up so much space. So if 50 people are driving to the street, that's how much space they take up. If 50 people take the bus, this is how much they fill. Of course, with bikes, or if they walk, it will be even less. So the problem is that every car needs space next to your house. It needs parking space next to your office or wherever you work. It also needs a parking space in front of the supermarket or in front of the gym or wherever you go. So if you base a city, concept of cars, you actually need so much space, like 4 or 5 parking spaces for every car to manage or to service the parking needs. So that, of course, has a huge impact on how the city is designed. But even if you design multi-story car parks, it is a big cost. And so if I go back to the idea of looking at a city as a company, we actually calculated, what does it cost if you drive 1 kilometer in a car? Well, it is about 20 cents. So it is a cost to society every time you drive the car because of all the investments that is coming along and because of the degradation of the environment. On the other hand, if you cycle, the society saves or earns 22 cents. So there is, in a sense, a business opportunity here for a city. If you can make people stop driving cars and start biking, then that's going to make money for you as a city. And you can see, here is an example from Copenhagen, a very famous place called Livable, which in 1975 was just a parking lot. Some years later, after we were trying to push back the cars, was again, as in the past, a lively place for people. And the same happened on many other squares. This is a square in the very center of Copenhagen. 1963, it was a big parking lot because people, as I explained before, were driving from the suburbs to the city center and they worked in these buildings. So they wanted to just park in front of the buildings, of course. But not too much later, people had enough and they didn't want to, they claimed back the squares in the city. And Copenhagen, so as for decades already, been trying to push back the cars, and this is the latest bicycle strategy. This is what Copenhagen wants to do within the next 11 years from now, by 2025. And already they've come a long way. So today, Copenhageners within the municipality of Copenhagen, 45% of the trips made are made by bike, and only 25% are made by car. And of course, we also have public transportation system, metro, trains, and buses. So bike usage is increasing, which is great, and car usage is decreasing. And we have new problems coming up because all these cars are creating congestion, and so even the newspapers write about it. What to do about that? Well, as you can see here, we have bike lanes. That's for you who want to design cities. It's important if you want people to bike that you actually provide them with a bike lane so they can bike safely rather than biking between the cars. But we are now expanding bike lanes and taking back some of the streets, and actually some of the streets are completely closed to car traffic. Like this one is now only a bike street, and people are not even staying on the bike lanes because there are too many cyclists, as you can see. And it really works. This is we need to provide elevated bike lanes to avoid congestion. So this was recently opened bridge that goes between two places. We also provide, for those that commute longer, we provide the opportunity to take your bike part of the way by a train. So if you live like 10 or 20 miles outside the city, you will take the train closer to your job in the city, and then you can bike the rest of the way. And if you have kids in the city, that's no problem. There are cargo bikes, there are idea is, of course, we also promote the rest of the world. So New York and many other cities have listened, and the same has happened now, or is happening in many other cities, which is great. So the let's talk about this used to be, it's called North Harbor, or North Harbor. It used to be an industrial area for port activities, but those port activities are now closing down. There is not so much logistics going on at sea anymore. So we are designing a whole new neighborhood on the water for Copenhageners, because what has happened is that since the city is now becoming attractive again, all the noise and the pollution and the smell, all of that is gone, and people prefer to stay in the city. So people are moving back to Copenhagen. About 1,000 people every month is moving back, and we need to provide new homes and new neighborhoods for these people. So the completely reversed the trend that people moved out of the city. Now they're moving from those dull suburbs back into these new developments. And so the new developments are more compact. They are we have developed what we call the 5 minutes city, where people can walk everywhere within 5 minutes. They can walk to a metro station. They can walk to the shops. They can walk to, let's say, kindergarten or schools. So everything that we do when we design or when we do the master plan, we have this principle in mind that we have to be able to reach all the necessary daily places you go within 5 minutes. Because otherwise you won't walk or take the bike. I mean, if it takes too long, if it's too far away, you would probably think about taking your car. But if it takes less than 5 minutes, you would never think about taking the car. You would always think about just walking or biking. So the principle in terms of how we plan the city is that we provide bike routes, really fast bike routes, and we adjust the traffic lights so they are optimized for bikes, for the speed of biking, whereas for cars we try to make it really difficult to drive quickly through the city. So we try to, if you choose, we don't want to completely prohibit people from taking the car. They can do that, and they need that, and we all need to take the car once in a while. But if we do, it will take longer than taking the bike or taking the metro or the bus. So, and also, of course, we design, everything in terms of the mobility. We design it so it's more safe for people walking, rather than having the street coming out from the left, going through the sidewalk and the bike lane. It's a street that stops, and then you have to carefully, as a car driver, you have to carefully look where you're driving and give way to bikes and pedestrians. So all of that also makes the city much more safe. So if we go back and say, okay, this is the statistics of people killed in traffic. That's the whole country at the moment. It was really increasing in the beginning when there were no seat belts and no airbags or whatever has been developed. So it peaked in 1972, and it has dramatically decreasing. So it's really a success that we can design now streets and also cars, of course, much better, so that we don't have to be afraid of transporting ourselves around. We don't have to be afraid of being killed by cars anymore. And if you look at the, let's say, the bottom line of the city, well, so in Copenhagen already, the city is saving $500 million because of the bike strategy and the things that the city has done in in terms of mobility. It's planning the bike strategy that I talked about. It's planning to increase biking even more, and it's planning to save another $100 million within a few years. So it's really good business. It's coming back to the bottom line of the city, and those money can be spent reinvesting in other things. And yeah, so that's, I think, the point in terms of mobility. Let's talk about energy. Energy, again, looking back a while, this is the conventional oil production, and it somehow peaked in 2008. It's now gone down. It is being replaced, unfortunately, I would say, by unconventional oil production like tar sands, and a lot of it is also replaced by shale gas and other new carbon fuels. But I think this curve, or this diagram is interesting because what you can see is the exponential growth of oil consumption from 1945 up until the first oil crisis in 1973. So in that period, oil was cheap. It was thought to be unlimited. It was, it was a new world. We were going to the moon. All were getting cars, and it was a completely different world. But in 1973, we kind of woke up and we realized that this couldn't continue. We couldn't just keep using more oil, and also there had to be a limit to how much oil there was left in the world. And then suddenly, of course, that triggered a completely new mindset in terms of energy consumption and what we wanted to do. So in the US as well as in Europe, the oil crisis hit us. In Denmark, especially at that point, we didn't have any production of oil. We imported everything from the Middle East. I think in the US, you had quite a bit of oil production, so it wasn't really the same big problem. But still, it was, I think, something that shook the whole world and the way we looked at energy. But in terms of energy, the Danish government, of course, had to do something. They put in place new regulation. They start thinking about how to be independent on oil and how to increase efficiency of the way we use energy. And so the challenge, of course, and this is the challenge today still, is that we have the conventional oil curve. How can we replace that in the coming decades with maybe more sustainable energy? I think if you also put on top of these curves the shale gas and of course the coal and the unconventional oil, it's a little bit different. Eventually, we will be using up all our carbon-based fuels, and we will have to think of the new types of fuels, and more sustainable types of fuels. But actually, the main problem, and let me come back to this, because the main problem was that when oil was cheap, it was cheaper than water. When oil was cheap, it wasn't a problem just to buy more and burn more, and it didn't really matter how efficient your energy production, your power production was. So the energy system that we developed at that point in time, the power plants and the light bulbs and all of that, they were very, very inefficient. And so if you look at the whole energy system combined, we have the power station. It's losing 70% of the energy when producing power. 70% is lost as waste heat. Only 30% is actually going to the power grid. And in the transmission, you lose another 9–10%. Then you reach the consumer, and the old light bulbs, they were 5%, maybe 10% at best, 10% efficient. So if you combine that, you get only 3% efficiency out of your whole energy system, and that's ridiculous. I mean, I can't even imagine why people thought that was the right way to do it. But so, of course, everywhere we started looking at how can we improve the efficiency. Why do we put, let's say, 70% of the energy into the ocean, or into the air as well? So what we did in, for example, in Copenhagen was we said, okay, we want to capture that heat and we want to put that into a district heating system. So we will heat all our buildings in the city with the waste heat from the power production. In the meantime, we also developed a more efficient power production process. So instead of 30%, it's now 40% efficient. And as you know, light bulbs has now been in the European Union. Like the old-fashioned light bulbs have been illegal. Now it's only the more modern and more energy-efficient light bulbs that we can buy. So the new system, which is, let's say, a development of the old system, which is system version 2.0, has already a 70% efficiency. So the only problem is that if you have the power station far away from the cities, it's very difficult to utilize it. So since 50 years ago, since 40 years ago, all the new power stations we've built have been built closer to the cities and closer to towns. And so if we look at the map, this is a map of Denmark, the old power station was centralized and very often far away from the cities because they were coal-based power stations. They were polluting. But over 25 years, the energy production system was completely decentralized. So every city had its own power station, and it was combined heat and power, and it was located much closer to the users or to the consumers of heat. And typically, this is a small example of that. They were, they had a boiler, they produced power, and they also had a heat storage so that they could produce the heat, but also store it for maybe 2 weeks until there was a need for it as a buffer. And as a result, the energy consumption of the whole country stopped or stabilized, and the CO2 emissions fell, and the GDP, of course, like in any country, is slowly growing. So this was kind of the first proof that CO2 emissions and energy consumption is independent of GDP. So a lot of politicians, a lot of people have thought for decades that the more money you make, the more high GDP you have as a country, the more energy you also need to use. But that's not the case. You have to decouple the two. And working with buildings, this is just a diagram showing how are the building regulations changing over time. This is building regulations 1961, and this is the allowable energy consumption in buildings. And of course, after the oil crisis, the requirements became much tougher. It was something you had to think about when you designed the building. How can I save energy? How can I stop wasting? And so we started insulating buildings. We started using double glazed windows. And later, every 5 or 10 years, the requirements have been much more toughened, and we're also looking at now 2015 requirements and 2020 requirements, because we have developed design methods, we've developed building components, we've developed construction methods that can actually achieve this without Fortunately, of course, we have a lot of existing buildings, so the average of all the buildings still, because many of the buildings are old, still rather high. It will take time because this requirements is for new buildings only. The old buildings have to be refurbished, all of them, to come down consumption. Yeah, so you can actually see how we can, if you look at this chart, which is the way we heat buildings over time from 1980 to 2050, and this is from a national strategy for energy that we have been. Well, first of all, you can see that we are increasing the building stock. We are getting more, increasing the floor area from 350 million square meters to about 600 million in this period of time. But also, you can see how we have rolled out the district heating system, the blue. We have phased out completely the individual boilers by now. There was at some point a belief that natural gas was clean and the right thing, the right energy source for the future. But now we know that it pollutes CO2, so we have also decided to phase out the natural gas boilers. And at the end, what we will have is a combination of district heating in the cities, and we will have individual heat pumps on the countryside, so far away from the city where it's not feasible to have district heating systems. We will have more individual heat pumps. Heat pumps are electrically driven. They take the heat from, for example, outside and bring it to the building. At this point, we have these wind power, and solar power, and the biomass power generation. So altogether, we will go from a society that in 1980 had mainly oil, coal as the energy sources, and maybe in 2050 we will have 10 different sources, so we'll be having much more, let's say, different mix of energy sources. And as a result, we have in Copenhagen, let's say, a district energy system that is very large. There's about 1 million consumers connected to the buildings, and we have 1 million people, and we have, let's say, a reach of about 50 kilometers, so that's 30 miles from one end to the other of the district energy system. And so let's talk about, what is a future energy system? Is it centralized or is it decentralized? And we've been analyzing that a lot. This site is the CARSLBERG brewery site that they used to brew all the beer in the city center. From 170 years ago, when they started up, they had this site, and they have been doing that for ever since. But now they moved out of the city, so they freed up a large part of the central Copenhagen, and this is now being developed into housing and creative businesses. And so we are looking at how to power that new development. And we've looked at, maybe we could put photovoltaics on all the rooftops, or we could, put micro wind turbines on all the rooftops. And this chart is showing, so what is the cost of that? Well, as you can see, it's very expensive in terms of investments, capital expenditures. We put all these small facilities, because they have to be installed, and we also have to maintain them, so the operational expenses are also high. But instead, we put only 2 large-scale offshore wind turbines in the water just outside Copenhagen, and you could feed the whole development with less power, and it would be just 1/5 of that cost. And so outside of Copenhagen, we now have 3 wind farms where we, like this, where we produce a lot of the power to the city. And this is an important part part of the Copenhagen energy strategy to be carbon neutral by 2025. In terms of the heat from the CARSLBERG development, we also look at produce heat locally on all the rooftops by solar power. And yes, you can actually do that, but it will cost you a lot of money in terms of the investment. You can also take only the large roofs and have more large-scale solar heating installations. But again, it's expensive to do it, so the much more feasible solution is you put on a field outside of Copenhagen, and you remember the map of the district heating system. It's a 50-kilometer reach from one end into the other, so it's really no problem to have a large-scale solar heating field somewhere outside of the city, and you can feed that into the heating system. And by the way, over here we have a seasonal storage. So this is like a football field. It's like 5-meter deep water tank, and in the summer we heat this water by use of these hot water solar panels. So it will be like 100 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Celsius hot. And then in the winter time we tap into this heat storage and then feed it into the city. And so what you can use, and this is what I talked about before, what you can also still use this field for is for what it was used for all the time. You don't have to solely or dedicate it to solar production. You can still use it for your farming or whatever you want to do. And so here we have what we believe is the future renewable and carbon neutral energy system. We have a backbone of energy distribution. We have both cooling, we have heating, we have power, and of course we still have natural gas or biogas in the future probably. And so we have industrial areas that both produce heat and use heat. We have farming that produces biomass for power production. We have heat production, and we have a lot of countryside energy production and also energy consumption. So yeah, this is I think the way that the strategy for both Denmark as a whole and Copenhagen in terms of energy. So the last topic I will touch upon, and then I'll be finishing off, is the water. So water, of course, is the potable water, and that it's no secret that we only drink, we drink tap water, of course. This is the cleanest source of water we can get. We also we can buy water, but actually until a few years ago that was really unusual to go and buy a bottle of water in the supermarket or whatever. For some reason that has been coming up more and more, that people are now buying also water, but it's not something that the city of Copenhagen is encouraged to try to avoid that, because the tap water is even cleaner than bottled water. And so the city also has a strategy for minimizing water consumption, and they are encouraging people to use water-saving fixtures, bathrooms, water-saving toilets, and so on. And because water is a valuable source, and to save as much of it as we can. So that's potable water. In terms of stormwater, we have a huge problem coming up. It's not only in Copenhagen, but I think in also a lot of North American cities. We get these very intensive rainfalls, and this is one example in Copenhagen a couple of years ago that was was a wake-up call. It has now been happening 2, maybe 3 times in the same way that we get 4 inches of water within 1 hour, and our sewer system just is not built with the capacity to absorb all of that water. So we need to find new ways to manage all the stormwater, and the thinking is, and this is described in our climate plan. The thinking is that rather than putting all the stormwater to the sewage system, we want to use what we have of spaces, parks, for example, but also streets to absorb the water temporarily until we can get rid of it. We are now modeling the whole city and finding out, so in the case of those heavy rainfalls, where does the water go and where can we take it to from where it goes. And so one of the projects we have completed recently and is now going to be built is this lake. If you go back, you see the lakes here. This is close to the city center. So they are permanently there. What we can actually do is we can lower the water level, the permanent water level. And so when it starts raining, as you can see here, all blue areas are flooding, we can just channel the water to these lakes that will then be lower. And so we will keep it there for a period of time until we can get into the sewer system and get it cleaned. And so a lake like this can be, a park, of course, in most of the time, but then once every year or once every 2 years, it will be flooded and it will be looking like this. But that's not a problem. We will accept it. It won't ruin anything. It won't cause us any damages. And so a couple of days later, we will have all the water has been captured by the sewer system and has been cleaned in the waste treatment plant, and so we're back to this situation. And in the streets, we are now designing differently. This would be a normal situation for a street. When it rains a little bit and we capture the water, in biospheres, for example, and this is the light rain. When the heavy rain comes, we start filling up the center of the street, so it becomes a river, and it can even go higher up, and we will have a situation where some of the roads are flooded, but it doesn't go into buildings, it doesn't flood the buildings. And so we've been looking also at all the water that we get rid of. How can we make sure that when we leave that back into the ocean, into the harbor, in Copenhagen, into the lakes, we want to clean it. And so we have a whole process now of cleaning the water. And as a result, the harbor of Copenhagen is now completely clean. It's seawater, of course, salty seawater. But it's for the last 15 years, it's been where we would go for a swim. And again, it comes back to our livable city idea. What can make people stay in the city rather than move out of the city? We want people to stay in the city and to offer them all the recreational things that they can do on the beach in the countryside. We want to offer them the same things in the city. And so this is the harbor bath. The first one, we now have 4 in the Copenhagen area. And people will just go there and swim in the summertime. This is another place. This is not even allowed to swim in, but people do it anyway because this is dangerous because of all the ships, the boats that cross the water here. But people will they're so used to just jumping in the water, so they don't really care where it is. They go there on a sunny day. And more positively is that all the new developments we are building, including the one I showed you before, We are building those on the water and the harbour front, and so every apartment or every house has its own private access to water. You can go out and take a swim in the water, you can take a canoe or a kayak, and you can go for a sailing trip or a swim. And this has really been changing also how people perceive the city, what they do in their free time and so on. And we've also inspired other cities, and this is in New York City. They are now talking about creating this plus pool. Unfortunately, the water in the New York area is not yet clean enough to swim in, so this is a completely closed pool, but the idea, I guess, is good. The idea of going to the harbour and taking a swim is fantastic. So this is the first step to really provide what we want in the city as a citizen, and to provide the opportunity to go for a swim or whatever. Right, so I think this is almost what I wanted to talk about. I just want to come back before I finish off to this slide. It shows all these different things that are normally in a city managed by different departments. So waste, and waste is one department, energy is another department, mobility is another department. So what you need to do in a city is you want the departments to work together, and so you want to find out where are the synergies. And coming back to this project, for example, this is a waste-to-energy plant. So first of all, the waste, the household waste is, let's say, a problem that people are paying to get rid of. So I'm paying to get rid of my waste. This is an energy production facility very close to the city center, by the way. So they are paying for waste because for them the waste has a value. It's like a fuel that replaces oil or gas or whatever other fuel that they can buy. So they pay also for getting the waste. So you can see there is a good business model there in collecting the waste and delivering the waste to the waste-to-energy plant, and people are actually making a lot of money doing that. So energy and waste is closely connected. But in this case also, we want the city to be a nice place to live. We don't want big ugly buildings. So this building has been designed by BREWERY School, by the way, to also be a recreational project. You can actually go to the top, and this is a ski slope, so you can go all the way down on the ski. And it's there all year round. It's not snow, but it's a kind of nylon surface, so you can actually ski all year round. We don't have a lot of hills in Denmark. All the hills are in Sweden and Norway, so we really need that. And so you have combined now the waste from the waste department and the energy department, and also the parks department in order to develop such projects. Another thing was the project I just talked about. Again, you have the parks department and the waste water department working together to create, instead of what we would have done maybe in the past, instead of building out the capacity of the sewer system, so we could build metro-sized concrete pipes under the city to be able to accommodate all this stormwater. But rather than doing that, we are saving the money. We are investing in changing the parks or lakes in this case, and so it's much cheaper, and it also solves multiple problems. And finally, there are this whole project that I also talked about in terms of solving multiple problems for the same investment. Finally, this was just because this is a project we're doing close by, and we are taking the same ideas that we have developed for modifying them, localizing them to the sea-harbor lakeside projects, and we hope to be also seeing some different approach to city development there in the future. So that was it. I think I will just show you the last final slide. This is about when we design, and I think this is just good advice when you design cities in the future. There are some key principles that are really important and are really helping achieve the livability of cities. That's it. Thank you guys.